Food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food. So said Hippocrates, known as the father of medicine, who lived between 460 and 370 BC. Hi, I'm Dr. Charles Byrne. I'm a psychiatrist, but I also have a deep interest in diets that prevent heart disease, and also diets that help the planet. I trained in medicine a long time ago in King's College Hospital Medical School in London. My co-host, friend and colleague is Sinead Dart O'Flynn.
Hello, I'm Sinead. I'm a student of public health and I am really passionate about diets and climate health. I see it as a great opportunity to improve our health overall. So thank you for having me on the podcast, Charles. So, Charles, can you tell me how you see the aim of our podcast?
Well, Sinead, I see the aim of the podcast as being to let people know that there are healthy, whole food diets that are very powerful in preventing us from getting heart disease. And if you do have a heart problem or a cardiovascular problem, like high blood pressure, the same diets can definitely prevent it from getting any worse. And some of these diets can actually reverse heart disease that's already started. And this has been scientifically proved. The other aspect of the podcast is that these same diets, consisting of healthy, whole grain and natural foods, can significantly help our endangered planet because their production causes the emission of much less greenhouse gases than diets with more processed food and a higher meat content. For example, producing 1 gram of protein in the form of beef causes around 250 times the amount of greenhouse gas emissions than producing 1 gram of protein from legumes, for example soya. The diets we are recommending are reduced meat or vegetarian diets, otherwise known as plant-based diets, in which the great majority of food comes from plant rather than animal sources and is far less processed.
Fantastic. So who exactly is the podcast for?
This will be a weekly podcast, and it's for people who want to keep their heart healthy and prevent heart problems from starting, or those who may have a heart condition or a cardiovascular condition diagnosed. It may be raised cholesterol levels, high blood pressure, or are overweight and want to get healthier. Or also if you have a family member or a friend who you want to assist with these problems.
Now, are there any other people who might be interested also?
It's also for those who are interested in protecting our environment and are worried about climate change and want to find ways they can reduce it by changing what they do, and in particular what they eat.
So how are we going to do that? And how do you see us supporting people while they make these healthy changes?
Well, we'll discuss diets and exercise that can help you with all of these problems. We hope to do it in a light-hearted way. We'd like to be your partners in getting healthy. We want to hear about your feedback, how you're getting on, and any problems that are coming up. We'll have a section every week in our podcast where you can give us feedback through social media, and we'll select some responses to see how we can help or clarify things. And we will actually have a Facebook and Instagram page called Your Heart, Our Planet, where you can do this.
Could you describe briefly what the diet or diets that we're going to be discussing are all about?
Yes, these diets are reduced meat or vegetarian diets with an emphasis on whole grains, whole grain or wholemeal bread, brown rice and brown pasta. Also, they contain plenty of vegetables and fruit and very low levels of fats and oils. Fats and oils are actually the same thing. A fat becomes an oil when the temperature is increased. We're aiming in the diets that we're going to tell you about to keep daily fat consumption of 20% or less of daily calorie or energy consumption. That may not sound too hard, but in fact in Europe and North America, fat consumption is often at a level of 40 to 50% of daily calorie intake. And much of those fats are bad fats called saturated fats. We're going to explain how you can keep your fat consumption low and still keeping food as tasty as possible. That's not easy because fat gives you a lot of tastiness in your food. However, you can retrain your taste buds to enable them to appreciate food at lower levels of fat and savor the tastes of vegetables, legumes, and whole grains. This is just like adjusting a thermostat in your room. If you make the room 1 degree cooler, at first you may feel a little cold, then your body will adjust to it and you feel fine. Your taste buds act in the same way, and they adjust to lower levels of fat in your food. Another example would be switching from full fat to low fat or skim milk. At first, it doesn't taste as good or feel right, but similarly, your taste buds adjust to it, and after a while, it tastes good. In fact, if you go back again to the full fat milk, that now tastes a bit sickly creamy. I always used to take full fat milk in my coffee, and I love milky lattes. But now, after becoming used to skim milk in my coffee, I find full fat milk very off-putting and far too rich and creamy. So your taste buds definitely do adjust.
I have to ask, how about sugars? I have a sweet tooth myself and I try to keep it under control, but can we take sugar in these diets?
Well, the bad news is the other aspect of these diets is that we're going to describe is that they're very low in sugars.
Okay.
In fact, the white sugar that we put in tea and coffee or cakes and biscuits is out altogether and to be avoided in these diets. Instead, there are two options for sweetening. First is to use honey or maple syrup as a sweetener, but there's a limit with each of these. There's a limit of 15 milliliters per day. That's about 3 large teaspoons. So that's like a daily consumption of a maximum of 3 large teaspoons of honey or maple syrup. The second option, and this should be used if you have diabetes, is to just use artificial sweeteners like canderel or stevia for sweetness. These are in fact very safe, despite some negative publicity that canderel had about cancer risk. It's not actually a risk because you would need to drink gallons of diet drinks containing it to have an appreciable risk. So in my book, sweeteners are good.
Good. That's good news about maple syrup. I'm a fan of maple syrup. So really one size doesn't fit all. So are you going to describe different types of diets that people can go on?
Yes, what I've described so far is the basic diet, but we're going to give 4 different subtypes of this diet or options that you can choose from. I've noticed that many people feel that they can't give up meat or fish completely, or they don't want to go completely vegetarian.
I think I might be one of them. So what can you do for people like me or those people?
Well, there is one option that we are suggesting of eating less meat, what we call flexitarian.
Okay.
It is a fact that the more meat a person eats, particularly red or processed meat, the more your chances of having heart disease or of developing cancer. So with the flexitarian option, we suggest to have some vegetarian days a week, at least one per week, and also not to eat meat more than once a day on the days that you do take it.
So what about the pescatarians? I know there are some people who like to eat fish but not meat.
Yes, that's fine. And fish in moderation is healthy. In our system, it would come up under flexitarian also, but I would suggest still having one or more completely vegetarian days per week and not eating fish more than once a day on the days you do take it.
Okay, so are there other dietary options?
Yes, another option is called lacto-vegetarian. Some people, including myself, would find giving up dairy products altogether quite difficult. So in this option, you can take dairy products, but they must all be very low fat or 0 fat. Or once a day, you could take some low fat cheese. The other 2 options that we are offering are both vegan, but with differing daily fat intakes. For the first vegan option, we aim to keep fat consumption at 20% or below of daily calorie intake, as with the other options we've mentioned already. But the final option is a vegan option we're aiming to keep daily fat consumption at 10% or below. This is the hardest option to follow, but the results are also the greatest. This option has been shown in a clinical study published in The Lancet to be able to actually reverse, at least to a degree, heart disease in most cases. In fact, 82% of the patients in this very low-fat study had their heart disease lessened at the end of a year. I know this is a very big claim, but I can quote you chapter and verse of the study that prove this. In fact, all of the things we're going to speak about in these podcasts are going to be what is called evidence-based. That is, they can be backed up by the scientific literature and evidence. I hope that hasn't been too technical to start with. I wanted to describe an outline of what we'll be talking about, and it will be in more detail over the coming months. Hopefully we can do it in a light-hearted way and have some fun with it.
Yeah, very important to be evidence-based, isn't it, Charles? So what about if you've already been diagnosed with a heart disease or some other medical problem? Can you go straight on to one of these diets?
Yeah, thanks, Sinead. That's a very important point. Heart and cardiovascular conditions are very serious disorders. And if you have one of these conditions, I'd advise you to talk to your doctor before going on one of these diets or embarking on some of the exercises that we'll be describing later, just to check that he or she is happy that it's compatible with your condition and treatment. For the vast majority of people, it should be. The other important thing is that if you're on any treatment, medication or otherwise, it's important that you continue with it and not discontinue or reduce it, because they are very serious conditions and the treatment can be very important. It may be that at a later stage, if the diet and the exercise help you, that in consultation with your doctor it may be possible to reduce your medication. But that depends on improvement in your condition. For example, lowering of cholesterol or blood pressure. However, if you don't have any heart disease diagnosed, and your problems are things like raised cholesterol or being overweight or slightly raised blood pressure, you could talk to your doctor about trying these diets and exercise, what we call lifestyle changes, before going on a statin or other medication. You could try them for 3 months and see if they work. They did for me. In fact, when I had my heart scare, I was put on a statin, but unfortunately I developed quite a marked side effect. I had very bad cramps in my leg. So I asked my doctor if I could try diet and exercise and see if I could lower my cholesterol that way. And it did work using the diets we're describing. And in fact, I've been 7 years now. Since that episode, I've not been on any medication, and I've been able to keep my cholesterol normal, and I've lost weight just by using these diets and exercise. And if they don't work, you can always then go back to your doctor and start on another medication or a statin to help with the problem.
That's fantastic, Charles. Thank you. So that neatly brings us towards our next topic, which is cholesterol and blood lipids, what they mean, why they're important, and we are also going to talk about exercise. But before that, we're going to take a quick break. So if you want, you can pause the podcast, put on the kettle and have some tea or coffee. If you like, try and put some soya light, oat milk or skimmed milk into it instead of full fat milk. And definitely no biscuits or cookies. Try an apple or a banana instead. So we'll see you in a bit.
If you find what we've been talking about in this podcast interesting, you can find more information about it in my book called Save Your Heart, Lose Weight and Help Save the Planet, which is available on Amazon.
So Charles, what's the big fuss about cholesterol and blood lipids? I've heard doctors talking about bad cholesterol, but what is cholesterol and blood lipids? Can you explain them to me? What is that all about?
Thanks, Sinead. Cholesterol and the lipids in your blood are a very good indicator of risk of heart and cardiovascular disease. They're also an indicator of how much fat and saturated fats you're taking into your body. We'll talk more about fats later, particularly what saturated fats are, but no matter what your age, it's good to have your blood lipids checked. And these are better done fasting. Cholesterol is a waxy, fat-like substance in your blood. Your body needs it to build cells, make hormones, and vitamin D. Your body actually makes most of the cholesterol in your liver, and about 3/4 of the cholesterol in your body is made by it. The other quarter of the cholesterol in your body is taken in food, but it's only present in food of animal origin, for example, meat, fish, and dairy products. So vegans are taking no cholesterol in their food. The problem is that too much of it can build up in your arteries, leading to heart disease or strokes. The cholesterol, together with fats and calcium, accumulates gradually in the walls of your arteries, reducing their lumen or diameter, in a similar way that calcium can build up on the inside of hot water pipes, reducing the diameter. This process is called atherosclerosis, and unfortunately too much cholesterol increases atherosclerosis. Furthermore, there is a type of cholesterol called LDL cholesterol, otherwise called bad cholesterol, and this, if the level is high, particularly leads to build-up of atherosclerosis. On the other hand, there's a good cholesterol as well called HDL cholesterol, and this tends to be protective of your arteries because it carries excess cholesterol from your arteries back to the liver to be broken down. So to protect your heart and arteries, you need to keep your cholesterol, your total cholesterol, and your LDL cholesterol low and your HDL cholesterol high.
Okay, that sounds like a difficult balancing act. How can you do that?
Well, one way we can do it, the balancing act, is simply by changing what we eat. By eating less meat and animal products, or by going vegetarian, we can naturally start lowering our cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, whilst simultaneously improving our HDL cholesterol. The other dietary thing that we can do is take in less fats, and particularly reduce saturated fats. Saturated fats are found particularly in red meat and processed meat, and in full-fat dairy products. So there's a double problem for our health. We're taking in too much cholesterol, and we're also taking in too much fat in our diet, including the bad saturated fat. As we said previously, if you eat plenty of vegetables and fruit, legumes like soya and beans, whole grains and brown rice, and reducing your fat and saturated fat intake, you'll be going a long way to keeping your blood lipids healthy and your heart healthy. Another way that you can do it is by regular exercise, and you can also do it by lifestyle changes. For example, stopping smoking and limiting alcohol intake. As well as heart disease and strokes, high cholesterol is also linked to high blood pressure and diabetes.
Are there safe levels for blood lipids?
Yes, for healthy adults, it's recommended the normal cholesterol levels. These are measured in millimoles per litre of blood, sorry to sound so technical, in Europe and in some other regions, but in the US, they're measured in milligrams per deciliter. So that is what you get when you get your blood results back, either of these different units. So I'll give you both types of measure for listeners in different countries. So for your total cholesterol, it should be below 5 millimoles per litre in Europe, or in the US it should be below 193.4 milligrams per deciliter, or some people say 200. Your LDL, or the bad cholesterol, that should be kept below 3 millimoles per litre, or in the US below 116 milligrams per deciliter. Your HDL, or good cholesterol, you want that to be above 1 millimole per litre for men, or 1.2 millimoles per litre for women, and that's in Europe, and in the US above 38.7 for men and 46.4 milligrams per deciliter for women. Now, in addition to that, there's also what we call individual risks. What I've described are the general guidelines for healthy adults, but your doctor may recommend different target levels if you have existing health conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, or other risk factors like smoking or high blood pressure. For example, a target LDL cholesterol for a person with heart disease may be as low as 1.8 millimoles per litre in Europe, or in the US 69.6 milligrams per deciliter. Generally, the lower your LDL cholesterol and the higher your HDL cholesterol, the better your protection against heart disease. But personally, I generally just use my total cholesterol level as a guide for monitoring. And if I can keep my total cholesterol below 5, I'm happy.
Okay, so you mentioned exercise earlier. How important is exercise in keeping your heart healthy?
It's vitally important, Sinead. Exercise helps your heart and arteries in many ways. Exercise also lowers your cholesterol and your LDL cholesterol. It also reduces plaque formation in the blood vessels. It's a very big topic, and we're going to talk about exercise in a later podcast in more detail. However, let's mention it briefly here. There are 3 basic types of exercise. One type is for building muscle strength, like lifting weights or using an exercise band. Another type is aerobic exercise, which is usually active and rhythmic movements like walking, jogging, swimming, or playing singles tennis. In aerobic exercise, your body gets warmer, you tend to sweat a little, your breathing is more rapid, and your heart rate goes up. The third type of exercise is stretching exercises like yoga or Pilates, or general stretching before and after other exercise. They are all important, but of the 3, aerobic exercise is the most important for your heart. This should be done regularly, if possible every day, or I would say at least 5 days per week. Brisk walking is a great way to do it. Put on some trainers and get out for a brisk 40 or 45-minute walk. You can also do it on a treadmill. You can also jog if you're able to. A safe level of activity is one where you're still able to talk to another person whilst you're doing it. Again, if you have any medical condition or history of heart disease, you should talk to your doctor before embarking on an exercise regime to get their advice. To prevent heart disease, the worst thing you can do is to be a couch potato. So try to be active most days.
That's great, Charles. Thank you. So we're going to take another break now, and when we come back, we're going to be sharing with you how to make a traditional style meal in a more healthy way, and where you can find more information about what we have been talking about. I often like that food is more spicy and interesting than, the typical food in the UK and Ireland. But today you're going to tell us how to make a more traditional style UK or Irish meal. Isn't that right, Charles? Often meat, potatoes, vegetables and gravy, but more healthy, heart healthy and planet healthy way.
Yeah, that's right, Sinead. Our typical meal, but in a way that will make your heart smile and breathe a sigh of relief. I'll get right down to it. It is possible to adapt many traditional types of meals to low-fat, vegetarian or vegan meals by substituting the meat with vegetarian burgers or sausages. Soya-based products resembling chicken can also be used. This is a very quick and simple example of this in this meal. This meal serves 2 people, and these are the ingredients. And I should say that this recipe and the ingredients will also be put up on our social media of Your Heart, Our Planet on Facebook and Instagram. So what do we need? We need, first of all, 2 vegan burgers. Personally, a vegan burger that I like is called Beyond Burger, and each burger has 13.6 grams of fat and 3.3 grams of saturated fat. Now, ideally, that's a little high on the fat. Ideally, I like to find a vegan burger or vegetarian burger with 10 grams or less of fat. But the Beyond Burger tastes good, so I make an exception for it. But there are many kinds of vegan burgers available in supermarkets and health food shops, and you can see the fat content of each burger as it has to be on the packaging. You may wonder how much saturated fat is healthy. Well, as a general rule, the saturated fat content of food should be about 1/3 or less of the total fat content. So you look on the ingredient list and it will give you fat and saturated fat. If the saturated fat is more than 1/3, you should think twice about eating it. If the saturated fat is half or more of total fat, I would say you shouldn't be eating it. So shop around, find ones that you find tasty and that haven't got too high a fat level. The next ingredient, now I'm gone a bit mad on potatoes, but we're in Ireland, so maybe that's that goes with the course. So I put 8 medium-sized potatoes. Many people would say 6 potatoes enough for 2 people. Depends on the size of the potatoes. And then the next item is 3 cups of frozen green beans. Now, any vegetable can be used in this recipe, frozen or otherwise. That's just an example. Then we have 4 heaped teaspoons of vegan gravy, giving 250 mils of gravy, depending on the brand. I use a vegan gravy called Marigold Vegan Gravy. Then 1 teaspoon of soy sauce is an optional extra. In addition, 5 mils or more of vegan spread can be used on the potatoes once they're cooked by each person if they wish it. But just to remember that 5 mils of spread adds approximately 2.5 grams of fat to the meal, depending on the spread. The spread that I use is Flora Lighter, which I found compared to others has a very low fat content and a low level of saturated fats. So how do we prepare the meal? First of all, we do the potatoes. And as I've said, you can adjust it according to the size of the potatoes and how hungry the person is. But potatoes are, contrary to common belief, healthy vegetables. They're what we call complex carbohydrates, and they're good for you. The only thing that makes potatoes unhealthy is what we add to them. If we cover them in butter or if we deep fry them, we turn something that's healthy into something that's unhealthy. With this style of eating, it's good to take plenty of complex whole food carbohydrates and vegetables. So wash and peel your potatoes in a normal way and cut them into halves or thirds, and to achieve pieces roughly the same size. Bring a large saucepan of water with a little added salt to the boil and add the potatoes. And bring back to the boil and simmer until they're cooked. And you check if they're done by testing with a fork. That is when they're no longer hard inside. But don't overcook them, as they can lose their taste and become a bit mushy. So a little firm in the middle is good. It usually takes around 20 minutes. Then drain them and mash in the saucepan with a potato masher. Don't add milk, dairy or other spreads, as this adds a lot to the fat content. As mentioned, a little vegan spread can be added by the individual if desired. As an alternative, the potatoes can be baked whole in their skins in the oven, although this takes a little longer, up to an hour. But both are a delicious way to eat potatoes. Whilst the potatoes are cooking, defrost your vegan burgers if necessary, and this can be done in a microwave for about a minute, and then cook on the grill, turning intermittently until they're lightly browned. Also, bring a saucepan of water to the boil and add the 3 cups of frozen green beans. Bring back to the boil and simmer for 4 minutes. Then drain and serve. Any vegetable can be used as an alternative to the green beans, which are just an example. With some vegetables, for example cabbage, half a vegetable stock cube can be added to the water when cooking, which adds to the flavour. Cabbage needs to be boiled longer to cook, between 4 and 10 minutes, depending on how soft you like it to be. Also, while the potatoes are cooking, make the vegan gravy. In a small saucepan, put 4 heaped teaspoons of vegan gravy powder. The instructions may differ depending on the brand. Measure 250 mils of boiling water in a measuring jug and gradually add some water to the saucepan while stirring. This forms a paste, and then gradually add the rest of the water. Bring it back to the boil, stirring frequently, and simmer it for 5 minutes, which allows the gravy to thicken. I find that adding a teaspoon of soy sauce to the gravy gives it a stronger flavour if necessary. Then warm 2 dinner plates and serve the vegan burgers with plenty of mashed potatoes and runner beans. Pour the vegan gravy on top. This provides a very tasty, quick and filling meal, which is close to the traditional meals eaten in the UK and Ireland. Now, if you have an air fryer, which I recently acquired, it's very good for this type of cooking also. And a similar meal can be made using one of these. But in this is, instead of boiling the potatoes, peel them and chop them a bit smaller and put them in your air fryer compartment and add just 2.5 mils of rapeseed or canola oil. Just pour that on top of your potatoes. Then cook for 20 minutes in the air fryer at 200 degrees centigrade. If you have a second compartment, you can cook your veggie burger in that at the same time. Usually it would be about 180 degrees for 8 to 10 minutes from frozen, depending on the size of your burger.
Thanks for that, Charles. That sounds delicious. I actually might try that when I go home now. And so we're going to give a healthy recipe like that every week. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. We'll be back next week and every week with another podcast. So thank you for listening, guys.
Yes, thanks very much for joining us on this episode. If you find what you've heard here interesting, you can find a lot more information on this topic of keeping your heart and the planet healthy in my book, Save Your Heart, Lose Weight and Help Save the Planet, which is available on Amazon as a paperback and Kindle. So until next week, bye.
Bye now.